You ever get the feeling someone's watching you? Not just watching, waiting. That's what it felt like. Every single day since we moved into that perfectly trimmed little suburban neighborhood. Everything looked nice. Too nice. Like Stepford level nice. But beneath the picket fences and pastel shutters, something was off. And her name? Karen. Not even joking. She was the HOA president. Of course she was. Short, sharp, blonde bob. Matching sweatsuit. Clipboard always in hand. If you so much as parked an inch over the line or left your trash bin out 5 minutes past pickup, she knew. And God help you if you didn't attend her precious monthly HOA meetings. She treated them like court summons. I thought she was just another busybody with too much time on her hands. Turns out Karen had power. The kind of power you don't give to someone like her. But my wife? She wasn't the kind to back down. She missed one meeting. One, because she was dealing with a high-level security breach at work. She's in tech, runs logistics for a company that contracts with half the HOAs in the state. She's basically in charge of keeping all their databases secure. But Karen didn't know that. Instead, she showed up on our porch, arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd sucked on a lemon. Your wife missed a mandatory meeting. That's a $150 fine. My wife just stared at her, cool as ever. I'm not paying for a meeting I never agreed to attend. Karen's eyes narrowed. Then I'll escalate. We both thought she meant more letters, more threats. But 2 days later, the cops showed up at our house, middle of the afternoon, because Karen reported my wife for non-compliance with HOA bylaws, like it was a criminal offense. That's when my wife looked at me and said, dead serious. She just made the dumbest mistake of her life. Because Karen didn't realize my wife oversees the digital infrastructure for every HOA in the county, including Karen's. And what happened next? Let's just say Karen went from calling the cops to calling her lawyer. I don't think Karen expected the cops to be so awkward about it. They showed up in full uniform, 2 squad cars, like we were running a meth lab, not skipping a neighborhood potluck. My wife met them at the door, calm as ever, holding a tablet in one hand and a coffee in the other. Ma'am, we received a report from the HOA president. The older officer began, clearly uncomfortable. Says you've violated several clauses in the association agreement. She wanted us to, deliver a formal warning? You could practically hear the confusion in his voice. Even he knew this was ridiculous. My wife tilted her head. And you're here because she called this in as what? A civil violation? She claimed there was willful defiance, non-compliance. Said she felt threatened by your refusal to cooperate, he said, glancing back at the squad car like he hoped someone would come save him from this conversation. I stepped in then. So, let me get this straight. Karen called the police because my wife didn't want to attend a neighborhood meeting. The younger cop rubbed the back of his neck. We're not here to arrest anyone, sir. But she insisted we make contact. Honestly, it's more of a formality. That's when my wife smiled. Not the nice kind, the strategic kind. She handed the older officer her ID, then spun the tablet around. Here's something she forgot to mention. I oversee the data servers and administrative back-end for the regional HOA coordination system. I have every ticket she's ever submitted, every complaint, every violation she's logged, accurate or not. The cops blinked hard. And here, she continued flipping screens, are 3 falsified entries she made in the last week. Fines that don't exist. Rules that aren't even in the current charter. You could feel the air shift, like the balance of power just tilted hard. The older cop cleared his throat. That's beyond our scope, ma'am. If there's a civil issue, it's not civil anymore, my wife said, voice low. It's federal. She's tampered with data tied to multi-property governance records. That's digital fraud. We all looked toward Karen's house. She was standing at the edge of her lawn, watching, still holding that clipboard like it was a weapon. She had no idea what was coming, because my wife had just logged into the master admin panel and started building a case. And the first violation? Karen herself. Karen probably thought she'd won. That smug little smirk on her face as the cops walked back to their cars? Yeah, she thought we got a slap on the wrist. That we were just another couple she could bully into compliance. She had no clue my wife had already initiated Phase 1. That night, my wife pulled out her laptop, eyes locked in that intense, quiet focus she gets when she's working. I've seen her defuse major server breaches, shut down coordinated ransomware attacks, and somehow still finish dinner on time. But this was personal. First, she audited every complaint Karen had submitted for our HOA. There were hundreds. Noise complaints with no timestamp, fines without citations, infractions based on landscaping rules from a version of the charter that hadn't existed in 3 years. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was fabricating infractions to punish neighbors she didn't like. And then, my wife pulled the thread. She used her credentials to flag the HOA's complaint system for a cross-check against regional bylaws. Karen had been recycling the same violations across multiple neighborhoods. Copy, paste, and intimidate? She'd somehow gotten access to filing privileges outside our HOA jurisdiction. That wasn't just wrong. That was illegal access. By morning, my wife had compiled a 32-page document. Screenshots, logs, metadata, even timestamps of when Karen had submitted fake violations while she was supposed to be attending mandatory board trainings. The kicker? Karen had fined one family over $900 for unapproved exterior paint. The house still had the original color from when the developer built it. My wife drafted an official breach report, sent it to the HOA Regional Oversight Board, and CC'd their legal department. Less than 24 hours later, Karen's admin access was revoked. She didn't even know it yet. Because while Karen was out on her morning patrol, probably measuring someone's mailbox height with a ruler, my wife was on a Zoom call with the State Housing Compliance Division. She's impersonated enforcement in 3 jurisdictions. My wife told the investigator, "This isn't just about our HOA anymore. It's systemic abuse." And that's when the dominoes really started falling. By that evening, Karen got a call. Not from us, from the state. I wish I could have seen her face when the call came in. According to our neighbor Jeff, who just so happened to be outside watering his lawn within perfect earshot, Karen was mid-rant about someone's recycling bin being half an inch too far from the curb when her phone rang. She answered it with that fake sweet HOA President Karen speaking voice. But the second she heard who it was, her posture snapped upright like someone had pulled her spine like a puppet string. Jeff said she turned pale, then red, then a kind of blotchy purple. Because it wasn't just a warning. It was an official inquiry. The State HOA Oversight Division had received multiple complaints, all tied back to Karen's name, IP address, and login credentials. My wife had made sure of that. Each violation linked to a digital fingerprint. Karen didn't even know she was leaving behind. They told her to cease all enforcement activity immediately while the investigation was underway. Karen tried to play it cool. "I'm just doing my duty as a community leader." But they weren't buying it. She asked which resident had filed the complaint. They told her flatly that the complainant was a credentialed systems security officer contracted by the HOA's own software provider. In other words, my wife. Karen's world started unraveling fast. That very night, our HOA board held an emergency meeting. Without her, word had spread. Turns out, Karen had been a nightmare to everyone, but most folks were just too scared to push back. But once my wife exposed the data trail, people started talking. One neighbor revealed Karen had fined them for excessive weeds while they were out of town attending a funeral. Another said she was threatened with a lien for a bird feeder. A bird feeder. My wife sat quietly in that Zoom call, camera off, just listening. One by one, people came forward. And Karen? She tried to join the meeting halfway through, only to find her login. Credentials had been revoked. She was locked out of her own domain. And that clipboard? It wasn't power anymore. It was just plastic. And now, Karen wasn't the one writing fines. She was the subject of a formal audit. And the best part? We were just getting started. By the next morning, It wasn't just Karen feeling the heat. The whole neighborhood had changed. Something had cracked wide open. People who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. The same people Karen used to scold for improper window coverings or non-regulation fence heights were now walking their dogs past her house, smiling. One neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, who Karen once fined because his daughter's birthday balloons violated airspace, started organizing a petition, not just to remove Karen as HOA president, but to disband the HOA board entirely and bring in an external property management company. Overnight, signs started popping up on lawns. Chore reform now. We are not Karen's tenants. No more clipboard tyranny. And my wife? She wasn't done. She set up an anonymous tip line, secure, encrypted, and connected to the same investigation the state had opened. She called it Project Reset. It gave residents a safe way to submit every bogus fine, threat, or abuse they'd endured under Karen's reign. Within hours, dozens of reports came flooding in. She mapped it all. Dates, amounts, false rule citations, even voice memos Karen had left on people's voicemails. One woman sent in a clip of Karen demanding she repaint her mailbox, at her own expense, because the gloss finish reflected too much sunlight. That woman? A 74-year-old widow on a fixed income. Yeah, that didn't go over well with the state board. Meanwhile, Karen was spiraling. She tried to send out mass emails defending herself, claiming she was the victim of a smear campaign. But her HOA email account had already been flagged and frozen under investigation. The more she flailed, the deeper she sank. The last straw? When the HOA's financial audits came in, turns out Karen had been reimbursing herself for supplies that didn't exist, nearly $4,000 over 2 years. Fertilizer, paint, beautification consulting fees paid to her own LLC. That clipboard? It had become Exhibit A. And while Karen was scrambling to control the fallout, my wife was on another call with a journalist. Because this story? It was bigger than our neighborhood. It was about every HOA Karen across the country who thought they were untouchable. And now, they were about to find out what happens when the wrong wife misses the wrong meeting. It started with a local blog post. Just a small piece on HOA, abuse and digital overreach. But within hours, it exploded. Because that journalist? She didn't just publish the story. She published receipts.